All right, Mike. Um, One of the things that I'm looking forward to is, first of all, I consider you a very good friend. I mean, uh, I've always admired what you've accomplished in real estate, but more or less, more than that, I really value our friendship. I think over the years since we got involved with Children's Hospital in Plano, I just feel like you're a really good friend. I use you as kind of a sounding block, and I just appreciate you taking the time.
Well, thank you, and right back at you. It's been a blast. We've known each other probably 20 years, but I'm like you. I feel like the last 10 we've gotten close, and it's been great.
Yeah. So tell everybody, like, how did you get into real estate and why?
So I was a finance guy in college, and so when you're a finance guy, you go to work at a bank. It really was never about. I thought I wanted to be in banking, but I did think it would be. I'd learn a lot because back when we came out of school, you didn't even know what business is, even though you had a business degree. So I went to work at a bank, Interfirst Bank. For those of you that are over the age of 50, if
Wow.
you don't, you can go Google it. Anyway, it was fantastic because they had a management training program where we rotated every 90 days through a different lending group. And I rotated through real estate and fell in love with it. I'd never been exposed to real estate. Don't admit it, my family's not related to it, but I just loved it. And then I actually got hired by one of my clients and left. I was at the bank about 3 years. Great experience, by the way. I tell young people all the time, I was spoiled. I had a big company that trained me in a lot of just business ways and professionalism. And I also made a great network of people in the real estate business that to this day I'm friends with and do business with.
And so, like, when you took your first job as in the banking business, you had no thought or desire for real estate until you had gone through the process of rotating.
Totally. I was just getting into the business world, trying to figure out what it meant and find my way. My dad was a Depression era guy, didn't get to go to college. He was a salesman who made his way up through. He had a great manufacturing company that built chairs and tables, but he wasn't. I didn't have a dad that grew up in corporate America, and so he's very entrepreneurial. So I definitely feel like I was lucky I got to see that. But so I no, I didn't know anything about real estate until I got to the bank.
And this is kind of weird for me to say this because as well as I know you, but so where was your first job in real estate? Was it Granite?
No, no, no.
Oh, so tell me first and to kind of current.
One of my clients was Blackland Properties, which is related to the Esteve family.
Sure.
And actually, it's funny how the world goes in circles. They owned all of the West End Historic District.
Right.
So I was a lender to them on several of those buildings. Actually, the West End Marketplace I was a lender on, which, as you know, we ended up buying and redoing into Factory 603. Weird 30-year later story.
Right.
Anyway, there was a couple guys associated with them, and we were going to do festival retail marketplaces across the country, like they had done there at West End Marketplace. And we had a property in Atlanta, the Virginia Hollins Charlie Barn. And I went over there in '86, and the world blew up in '87.
Right.
And so that whole thing got put on hold. And what was interesting, Bill, you'll laugh at this because I think you're literally the greatest salesman I possibly know. This is when you're young and dumb. They said to me, "Hey, we really want you to come over. You're awesome. We want you to be our finance guy, but we can't afford to pay you anything." And I was so young and dumb. I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, how do we deal with that?" And they're like, "Well, we created this joint venture with this company called Kennedy Wilson out of California, which at the time
Kennedy
was an
Wilson.
auction marketing company." Okay. And they
Sure.
said, "You just need to go do some deals with them and figure out how to pay for yourself on the side while we're doing this." And it's like young and dumb. I was like, "Okay, that's great." So, so I ended up doing that and, kind of selling some deals through them to pay my way. And then the market turned and it was clear that it was just wasn't going to be a long-term thing. And because of the market crash, again, remember I told you I made some great relationships at Interfirst Bank and the real estate
Right.
business. Well, one of them called me. They were over at Texas Commerce Bank and said, "Hey, we need to start a foreclosed real estate group. This thing's getting bad. Do you want to talk to us?" And I literally said to them, "Hey, I'm happy to come in and be a real estate mutt. I don't want to be a banker. So if I can do real estate inside the bank, I'm happy to do that." And thankfully, I got to do that. And so I went over there and we grew my department effectively, which was taking back foreclosed real estate. And then my job was to have a team that asset management ran it and then sold it, right? Because we didn't want to be in the business. It was
But
really
was there value creation in there, or were they just trying to get you to manage it and get rid of it?
There was a little bit of value creation. I
Yeah.
mean, that was where, look, I'm an entrepreneurial guy. And so
Right.
I would tell the bank, hey, let's not sell this for $10. Let's go spend $5 and we sell it for 20. And
Perfect.
I was really lucky again. I had a super boss, and the CEO at the time was John Adams, who just kind of let us do our thing. And thankfully, because I was really a mutt, they didn't know what we did over there because they didn't want to be in that business. We
Right.
kind of got to do I could do things with just my boss. I didn't have to go to committees. And
Which is
so
awesome.
he was great. He's a friend to this day, taught me a lot. It was my first job, like growing a department and hiring people and managing people. Had a lot of interesting people because we had real estate people who were hiring inside the bank. It was great. And so
Well, and you were meeting a lot of you're probably dealing with a lot of your friends, right, that had issues.
totally. Although
Yeah.
I was young, I always like to say that recession, I got a free pass. I got to watch it. There are later ones that I have tattoos from that I didn't get to watch. I had to
Right.
participate.
Right.
It was great. And what it set up for me is as we were kind of getting out of the business, I think, maybe they wanted me to participate in going back into banking in some way or shape, but that really wasn't what I wanted. And so I do think I had a good seat to see, this is back in 90,
Right.
that, wow, this may be an opportunity to get on the other side of the business and get back out. And
Right. Well,
that's where
and
we
maybe
started
see
Granite.
where people made mistakes too, right?
Yeah, and that's where we started Granite Properties in 91.
91. Okay, so let me ask you this. Did you ever look back at the time you were at the bank and took that stuff back and see how you protected the bank on their balances from assets taken back and what they sold for?
Yeah, and honestly, I was still young and dumb, and so
Yeah, okay.
I was doing things that worked, but I shouldn't have taken the risk to do them. I'll never forget, we had like a 24 unit townhome project, and there was some guy from New York who was buying it for like, I don't know, 1.5 million or something, right? And I told the guy, I'm just telling you right now, if you don't go hard on Friday, which is your date, on Monday I'm raising the price. And I was like young and dumb, like what,
Right.
why? And the guy didn't go hard, and he called me on Monday, and I said it's 100,000 more. And he said, "Come on, man, I'm ready to go hard this day. What's the big deal?" And I said, "I told you on Friday it's gonna be more." And I was lucky that my boss let me play that game. We got
Did you get
100,000
it?
more. We got 100,000 more. But it,
That's
it
awesome.
wasn't. My point is, I mean, that sounds great. It was really stupid. It was young and dumb. The bank had other, ideas, and I was lucky that they let me get away with doing some of that stuff.
Okay, so since you've been on the deal side, since we're talking about taking stuff back, what was your toughest deal, and what did you learn from it?
So there's a couple ways to answer this because tough doesn't mean bad. Although,
Right. No, I agree.
I
Right.
think
It can work out. I agree.
the brain goes to bad when you say tough. So
Right.
I'm going to use one tough one that wasn't bad. It turned out fantastic. But we did a large retail venture with five shopping centers in 4 different states. And it was a life insurance company that they owned it all equity. And a new CEO had come in and they wanted to get out of the equity business in real estate, but they didn't want to run off. They had like $5 billion of equity real estate. They didn't want to run the assets off. So they wanted to do highly levered participating debt so they could keep the assets.
Mm-hmm.
But Trammell Crow brought the deal to us at the time, and they wanted to be the developer partner and we would be the capital. And it was a fascinating deal because you had 3 parties in the room that all had slightly different things they wanted to get done.
Different
So
motives, right?
it was a very highly structured deal, really complicated deal with all these waterfalls and buckets. I mean, it's almost like, when you got to start drawing pictures in a deal, you've overcomplicated it.
For
And
me, it is. Yeah.
this was one of those. But honestly, it ended up, working out fantastically for all 3 parties. And so it was a very tough deal to put together. But I will tell you in hindsight, and I learned this at the bank, just because the deal worked didn't mean you structured it right. The market could be great and your structure
Right.
just worked out. And
Right.
I do think we structured it right, but it was also a great market.
Right.
A more recent deal, I mean, I think you know this, we've been working on this entitlement deal in Cambridge.
Yeah.
We have been under contract on an old jail in the middle of Cambridge from the state. And, we haven't done a lot of work in the Northeast, and that entitlement process is completely different. And it's been 8 years,
8 years? I
eight
didn't know it
years.
was that long.
We just got entitlements last fall, and literally it went to the state Supreme Court. That's how much we got sued. It was really a crazy thing. And the state owned the building that we're buying, but the garage is owned by the city. So we got through this 8 years of entitlement, all the time knowing we have to have parking. And by the way, that garage was built for this building, it was just owned by different entities.
Yeah.
Well, then, we get done with that feeling like we're done. And then the city decides they're going to take their pound of flesh, right? It's just how they work up there. And we spent, another year and a half, and it was silly stuff, Bill. I mean, it's funny being in Texas, you don't realize how fortunate we are that I like to say the way you entitle stuff is you bring your gun out, you go down to the courthouse, you shoot somebody, and you got entitled. And but honestly, they literally, the stuff we would deal with, and it's just funny. It's why it made it tough for us, because we weren't set up for these kind of negotiations. By the way, this building was built 60 years ago. Okay.
So did you buy it, or is it subject to entitlements? Have you been tied up for 8 years?
It was an option subject to entitlements that we closed last fall. And, but for 8 years, it was just under option. But to give you a point, it's a 22-story tower that one of the lawsuits we had was from a neighbor that said, I don't like the shadows on my house. And we're like those shadows were there when you bought your house. Like, I don't even understand how this is a conversation.
Right.
And yet,
listen to them.
We had to negotiate to take 2 floors off a 22-story building because they didn't like the shadows. I mean, it's just crazy stuff.
Okay, now, and let me ask you one other question. So you had that under option for 8 years. Did the price change any over 8 years?
Greatest structure we've ever done.
So you bought it, you closing to last year at an 8-year-old price?
No carry, no.
Oh my gosh!
But Bill, we spent a lot of money on legal.
No.
We spent a lot of money on architectural, and we didn't know we would get home.
Got it.
So so that was a different tough, because we were in a place we weren't used to, doing entitlements we weren't used to, and it was really, really frustrating.
Wow. Okay, so how about, does a bad one come to mind? One that just kind of was a mess? Not one that was tough and worked out, but one that didn't work out, and what you learned?
For sure.
Yeah, I've got a few of those myself.
We did a very large venture, and I want to be careful here about, because I don't want to get into who and what, but we did a very large venture in another product type with a company that had done a lot of that business. And it was a very financially structured, geared, like too much leverage kind of deal. And it was large. We did a lot. And there were 2 big mistakes that I learned from. Number one is, literally before we were closing the deal, I made the comment, wow, this thing is so financially geared. I feel like this is a Maserati. You're driving down the freeway, and if you just get a little pebble in the rocks, it's going to spin out. It's going to be a big problem. Like, I made that comment before we closed. Like, should have been message to self, if you're thinking about this.
Right. Why are you doing it? Right.
Why are you doing it? And then, and this is a little bit of a different learning lesson, is that there were several kind of leaders involved in that venture. And I don't think I realized as much that one of them was the glue, and that person went away in the middle of the deal, and everything turned out different because the glue wasn't there.
Got it.
And the lesson, and you and I know this, is there's a saying I have that's been learned because of tattoos I have on my back from bad deals.
Right.
Is that good partners highly likely can survive bad deals. Bad partners can't even survive good deals.
Right.
And so
it's all about the people, right?
It's a people statement, and you and I know that, but sometimes you got to get tattooed to learn that. You think you're going to make money on a deal, and you kind of look past that.
Right. Okay. And so tell me about, like, you have built an incredible team there. And so, I mean, one, you've done a great job of finding quality people and keeping them long-term. I mean, I think one of the hardest things in business is one, finding somebody that is talented to add to your team, but continuing to motivate them and keeping them long-term. Like, what's your outlook on business and your approach and your thoughts about building a team and keeping quality people?
Well, I think I would start with, I wish I could show this to you. My dad, you can learn a lot from a Depression era guy that wasn't educated. And he had a little slide on his, board behind his desk that simply said, people are important.
It's right.
And it sounds so stupid simple. But at the end of the day, we always say around here, we're actually in the people business. We just happen to execute in the real estate world.
Right.
And so, I mean, I think the theory is I'm a people person. I love being around people. I love relationships, and I'm kind of wired this way, and so I feel this way about others. I think human animal has amazing potential,
Right.
and even more. And I use marathons as a great example, or triathlons to kind of prove the point. To just draw a picture. Most people don't believe they can push themselves to that level of physical thing, but the human animal can do it. It's a
Right.
mental thing you got to get through. And
Right.
so if you extrapolate that to the business world, I always tell people the best days I ever have at the office is when somebody in our office didn't believe they could accomplish something, and somehow you gave them the motivation and belief they could. And when they do, to see the look on their face when they actually did it. I mean,
Right.
that's the greatest day I ever had at the office, is when somebody is proud of what they did, and it maybe was something they didn't believe they could do.
Right.
Because once they do that, it's a whole new reset. They never look
Right.
back, right? They
Right.
go to the next place.
I agree. I do think for me, like with my kids, it's all about drive or grit, determination. I mean, I will take a street fighter over highly educated. I mean, it's somebody, somebody that's driven to do more. Because most of it is, like you said, you're betting on people, but it's also you got to have somebody that's got the talent that wants to push themselves to excel, right?
Yeah, yeah. Or accepts being pushed. Even if they didn't want to push themselves, if they get bit by that bug,
Right.
if you show them that, yeah, I'm going to push you, and they do something, they get excited about that.
Right.
I will tell you, I think the hardest thing for me, and I think this is hard for all leaders, you can't use the same hammer on every nail. And so everybody's different. And just because, Tommy or Sally may be wired a certain way and either respond to the tough coach or the gentle coach,
Yeah.
you've got to, it's your job as the leader to adapt to the person. And that's hard when you have a certain personality,
Right. Right.
I think.
Well, yeah, no, I completely agree. And I think one of the things, like, you lead such a big company. I mean, do you have any kind of philosophies on leading your company and what you think a good leader should do, or how they should act?
I don't know if I have any big philosophies. I do have some things I adhere to. One is that I tell our people all the time, I do not think it's the leader's job to have the answer. I think it's the leader's job to get the answer, and those are two different things.
Yeah.
And I tell them all the time, I refuse for you to believe I'm going to walk around like the king and have all the answers. I absolutely refuse that. What I will what I will do is I'll listen to everybody else and make the decision, right? Which means I'm going to go get the answer, and you may have a better answer than me. And great, we found it there. I like that one.
Right.
The second picture I like to draw for our teams is I refuse to be the think for you to think the picture is I've got a rope over my back with a wheelbarrow and I'm going to carry people up a hill. The picture I like is you guys are running down the hill and I'm having to figure out how to run as fast as I can to stay in front of you.
Right.
So in other words, you should be pushing us versus somebody pulling you. And
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I mean, like, what about, well, you've got offices across the country. I mean, is there anything like leading people that, how often do you get to other offices? I mean, are you a good delegator? I think you probably are, right? Because you got a really good team, but what's your view
I
on
think
that?
I think I've gotten better. I would say, 15 years ago, you're probably like me. I think I'm right most of the time. And
Right.
so, you have to learn to trust other people and realize that they're probably actually better than you, and you just need to get out of the way. So
Hmm.
that definitely took a while. I think I'm much better at it now. And some of it is we have a phenomenal team, so it's easy to trust them, and realize they're doing better things than you might do on your own. I love getting to our other offices. I love meeting with our teams. I do it all the time. I learn from them. I get a good pulse on what's happening in the company and what people are thinking about. And it's amazing the little comments somebody will make somewhere that are like, wow, like that's actually a big comment I didn't think about, right?
Right.
Something relative to the business.
Right.
Um, but your job as a leader is to grow other leaders, right? And so that you don't have to be in the way, and realizing they may be better than you, and you actually need to get out of their way.
Right. And so like COVID, right? COVID hits in March, and like we're always sitting here, when's the cycle going to be over? We're always worried about where the right cross is coming, and I know you have a longer view than most developers because of the way you're structured with your capital, that you hold assets long term, and you probably have the most stable capital relationship of anybody I know. I've always envied that, being on the other side. But so you got COVID. So how do you lead through that? I mean, like all the unknowns, anything you've learned from COVID? I've got a couple I've changed on outlook, and I was wondering if COVID kind of affected you anyway.
What I'd love to hear what your couple are.
Okay, I found that the slowdown, the first 90, 120 days when we were kind of all at home, I actually enjoyed the slower pace. Like I am one that loves to run from one. I create fires so I can go put them out or go build another one. And I think I've found that I enjoy balance more than I thought I would. And I think you and I've talked about it. I've always been one that said, I don't think I could ever quit working. I mean, I might be able to work less, but I could never just go play golf because golf isn't as much fun as work. But I think I've learned that I want more balance in my life because I do want to, as I get older, live as well as enjoy business. And I wonder if you had any of those kind of moments.
Well, I'll talk more of the business. I agree with you on the personal stuff, but I'll talk more of the business stuff. And it actually does go back to a little bit about your question about leadership, which is, look, man, I tell people all the time, we're all human beings. We all take our pants off and go to the bathroom the exact same way. So we can
Right.
think we got these organizational structures and titles and bureaucracies,
Right.
but we're all human beings.
Right.
And so I think it's important as a leader, and this really mattered in COVID, to be very real. And so, and to be very open and to be authentic and vulnerable. And I know there's like cool titles and leadership books now, but to me, it's just like being a person versus
Yes.
trying to be I'm Michael Dardick. I'm not CEO. I'm Michael Dardick, right? That's a person.
Exactly.
And people, the title can actually get in the way for a lot of people. And so, look, man, when COVID hit, I was doing videos to our team saying, hey, this sucks. This is scary. So being realistic, but then saying, we're going to get through this, right? I'm not, we will all get through this onto the other side. So I would tell you part of my leadership is I think I'm an optimistic realist. And so I start with reality. I don't run from a problem and identifying the problem. I then move to, okay, how are we going to go do something positive in light of that problem? Right. And so, that's kind of throughout COVID, I thought it was really important to stay connected, be honest about what we don't know. Still talking about that today with our teams about, the future office, like what don't we know? And then
Right.
we pretty quickly go to, while we don't know this, we've got lots of people that have been, networking and reading and learning and talking to our customers. And here's what we believe.
Right.
Here's the direction we're going to head. And by the way, if we're wrong, we'll adapt.
Right. And how did you handle if you had tenants that had stress or distress because of COVID? My guess would be you would be very relational with your tenants.
For sure.
Yeah.
Look, it's we immediately, anybody that wanted to talk to us about they had problems and they needed help, we were pretty much, hey, we're certainly going to help you, but you guys understand we're fiduciary for capital. So let's have an adult relationship. Like we need information from you. We need honesty. And yes, we'll help you. And honest, Bill, what it got down to, and you're like us, we're largely in Class A office buildings. Most of our businesses really did not have problems. And there was only a handful in each city. Now, our restaurants, like at Granite Park, we had a bunch of restaurants. That was Katie bar the door. We need to totally be on the ground with you guys helping out. This is a problem.
And have you lost any? I mean, did they all make it?
They're all in business, but I could say
brutal. It's horrible to watch.
Anytime,
right.
I think most of them, we have been working on a bridge to the future with them because at the end of the day, it's amenity to our park. And
Right.
so we want to help them.
Right. And so, like, one of the questions they've got that I'm supposed to ask you is uh, failure. Do you ever worry about failure? Have you, I don't fear failure as much as I've always learned from it. I think pain or distress creates indelible experiences that form you, that mold you, right? I think it makes you better. But I mean, everybody looks at you and probably thinks, it's just been a cakewalk to where you're at. But do you think about failure, or how is failure, if the few you've had, affected your approach to business and maybe your life?
So first of all, your comment about indelible impressions is my word was tattoos.
Right,
I,
exactly.
I've got them all
Scars.
over, and they're not going to leave me, right? I want those tattoos because those.
Right. You don't want to forget.
I don't, for sure I failed a ton, Bill, more than a couple times. What we talk about around here is number one, try not to have a catastrophic failure. We
Right.
can live with lots of failures, just don't have a catastrophic one.
The flesh wounds are okay, right? You can survive them.
Yeah, and then make sure you're willing to be vulnerable enough to really learn the lesson, because then it's not really a failure. It's going to create. We think about those flesh wounds, as you call them, and say if we stop and learn, we're probably going to create 4x from that learning that we did from that failure, and it's going to actually be a net win. And
Right.
nobody likes to go through the pain of difficult conversations with partners or losing money, and we've all been there. But again, if it's not catastrophic, if you can get past it,
Right.
I don't, I would say that I think I'm just lucky the way I was born and wired that um, I kind of get a stomach ache from problems, and that's a motivator to me.
Right.
When I get a stomach ache, it's like, hey man, you got to get in the game and get focused here.
Right.
And I'm competitive, so it like makes me say, okay, how do you make this work? It may
Right.
still be a failure. One of the things we talk about all the time over here, Bill, is losing less money is making money.
Exactly.
Right?
Well, and don't you think first loss, or I think you need to be timely in your reaction. I mean, if there's a fire under the couch, go put the fire out, and then let's figure out how we fix the damage. Right? Don't let the fire burn while you're trying to figure out what to do.
Yeah. So I think I've been lucky to be able to mentally reframe failures as learning opportunities, challenges, competitive. How do you make it less worse?
Right.
And so I wouldn't say that I've been overly damaged by failures, even though I've had lots of them.
Yeah, I would say for me, it's made me better. Right? I mean, it's like you say, the tattoos. In 7, 8, 9, for me, it was leverage. My basis was good. I love my assets, but I was over levered. And when markets shift, people use leverage to try to get yield, and not Bill Cawley. There was a day when I was there, I would never do it. And just like that and mezz, you're like, I won't do mezz because I just think I'd rather have the equity. I'm not going to juice returns with mezz because I think mezz is risk. But that's just from having been in that position and having difficult outcomes.
Hey man, I'll never forget. This is years ago when I don't know what the environment, and maybe you and I do this a lot. Teach a one-off class or something, and there was some highfalutin, super educated person more than me on Wall Street talking about positive leverage, and I said to him, "Well, have you ever actually understood negative leverage?" No,
Right.
no, it's the tree doesn't always grow to the sky, and
Right.
so the beauty, one of the beauties of getting old is you get lots of experiences, and those are helpful.
Right.
And so one of our jobs as leaders is to pass those on, not like, oh, young stepper, you don't know, just more, let me share what I went through
Right.
and what I took from that, and you can do what you want with it. It's just you haven't gone through it yet, so I'll share what happened to me.
Right. Well, like, I would think like a lot of people that are going to listen to this podcast are going to be the young people getting into the business or just getting started. And I remember when I was in my 20s, and I would have somebody that was in their 50s telling me I am going to be successful. And I'm looking at the guy going, how the hell do you know that? I mean, because I just wanted to get there. So like, if you were, what do you have to say to the people coming out of college or the young people in the business? I mean, what's your view, or what, what advice would you have for them getting into the business today?
Honestly, you and I talked about this. I would say this to any young person, which is, by the way, I'm a super fan of young people coming out. I think a lot of people kind of shit on millennials, and I don't buy that at all. I think they're smart. I think they're authentic. I think they're aspirational,
I agree.
which is fine. I think my thing is, be willing to be a little bit patient as you're running up the totem pole to learn and to uh, build a foundation. For me, the bank was a foundation. I built learning about
Right.
businesses and how balance sheets work and how banks treat borrowers, treat lenders, and
Right.
how professional people go up in a business. And so, even though I wasn't going to be a banker, it was a really valuable 3 years for me. And I think sometimes really smart young people are so aspirational, they don't want to necessarily go through the reps because they're ready. They think they're ready to go. And I think some of those reps, I always tell people, sometimes if you put time in and you make, 1x less now, it'll be worth 10x in 5 years. So, put the reps in, learn the business right, learn from the right people. I'm really big on, I would tell somebody to go work for Bill Curley and learn about the business and make 10,000 less, and then go work for some jerk and make 10,000 more, because I think it's just going to be, you get stink on you when you hang out with people that don't do things right. And
Right.
you got to learn how to do things right. It's a
Right.
it's a very long road. You and I know that.
Right. My advice to young people is get with somebody that cares about you, right? But somebody that knows what they're doing that cares about you. Don't worry about the money. Build relationships and learn. Just learn. It's like continuing to be in school. I mean, forget about the money. Just get in the right slot with the
I,
right people and learn.
I am always like, your first 2 to 3 years, your job is to be a sponge.
Right.
Just
Right.
learn everything you can possibly learn. And by the way, and you were probably like this, I was just wired this way. I was the first in the office and last out because I don't want to miss anything. I just wanted to see everything I possibly see.
One thing I learned in life, and it took me a little while to get there, but the harder I worked, the better I did. And it's about effort. It just is. Okay, so we're in COVID. We're now 9 or 10 months in to something we thought would take 90 days that now they're saying is probably going to go to midsummer next year. Nobody really knows. What's your view of the future? What do you think about Dallas? What do you think next year is going to look like? What do you think the next 2 or 3 years are going to look like? What's your view?
Yeah, we talk about it this way, Bill. We think there's kind of three gates you got to walk through to get to the other side. The first gate is the health gate. And, until you get through that gate, nothing matters. And I agree with you. Second half of next year, somehow, some way, we'll be through the health gate.
Right.
And then I think the second gate is the economic gate. And I actually think, technically a recession is 2 quarters of negative GDP growth, right? So I think fourth quarter will be the end of the recession technically.
Fourth
Uh,
quarter this year?
yes, but
Yes. Okay.
but I think second quarter next year will be better than first. Third will be better than second. I'm talking about the economy, not real estate right now.
Right. I agree with you.
But I think that is a very, very slow recovery. I would almost describe it as we're no longer going backwards, not we're really going forwards.
Right.
But I think real estate's going to be tough next year on the demand side, particularly in office leasing. We're just, we're in this environment where, people are going to start. I do think people have been a little bit duped on the recession because they've been so focused on the health problem. And I think once that's gone, it'll be a little more glaring wherever businesses have problems. And then I think the longer one, Bill, for our business is what I'll call the behavioral change gate. And that is, in all these parts of real estate, people are going to behave differently because of this forced, lockup program, go virtual. And so I think that pendulum will swing a lot before people figure out what their new normal is. I think that's probably a 2 to 3 year gate for that pendulum swinging back and forth. It doesn't mean business is bad. I just think we won't know what new normal is for probably
Right.
2 to 3 years, really,
Right.
because lots of people are going to try lots of things. And but I'm super excited about the future because this is, every cycle has a reset. This is a reset. You got to figure out what's the new things your customers need, and this technology has changed a lot of what our customers need. And I think the people that lean into it and say, I'm willing to change and adapt to help my customer are going to win big. And that's not Pollyannish. That's just what I believe.
I agree with you. And let me ask you this. Do you think density is over? Do you think we ever go back to 6 or 7 per thousand parking when the vaccine's here and COVID's in our rearview mirror? Do you think, I mean, do you ever see it going back to the way it was before it hit? Or I think it's going to go back a lot, but I still think it's not going to be the same.
No, I mean, look, in the last decade, we've gone from, I don't know, 250 to 275 square feet per person to 175.
Yeah.
And I would tell you before the pandemic, I think it was getting close to inhumane, right?
Right.
And so I think even though
I agree with that.
well, even though we'll be past the health thing, people will still have the tattoo memory of healthiness. And
Right.
I think that density will go back out a little bit. It won't go anywhere near 275, but it may go to 200, 225, which may offset some of the work from anywhere stuff, although I still think there's some headwinds in the business.
Okay, so you got several new buildings. You're talking Boston, you're uptown, I think, is your building designed in Plano? You're probably ready to go there, right?
We're ready to go.
So what are you changing? I mean, and if there's stuff you don't want to talk about, that's great. But I mean, are you going back and changing some things about how that building is going to operate and or design that you would have done a year ago?
On the edges. So remember, we were all building the next Class A thing. So we were all
Right.
trying to add the outdoor amenities already, which I think are important, the indoor-outdoor work environment. Let me say this before I get into a little bit more about that. I think people are going to be happy to go to the gym and happy to sit in a lounge together, and they're not going to be wearing masks, right? So
I agree, because we're social creatures.
Right. So I don't think a lobby needs to have partitions in it. I don't buy any of that stuff. So,
I agree with that.
But I do think we're going back in and making sure on the HVAC side, do we have the wellness and healthy things we need? And so on the edges, for sure, we're making some changes, but I wouldn't say we're going back and redrawing the building.
Right. Like, they show pictures of 4 people at a table with plexiglass dividers. And I mean, oh my God, who the hell wants to do that? I think that's crazy.
You and I are the same. We're social animals. We always have been since the time people sat around a fire, right? Thousands of years ago.
Right.
And will people maybe be more cautious about how they do what they do? Yeah, but I mean, look at right now, and I don't think it's good. I think people are getting tired of masks and not going out, and they're going out just because they're tired of being cooped up.
Right. Right. Okay. And so, do you think that Dallas as a market, because you play in a lot of different markets, I mean, don't you think Dallas is going to be a very attractive place? And do you think people are going to continue to leave places like New York and San Francisco and Chicago to go to environments like Texas and Atlanta and those kind of places?
Well, Dallas is just an unbelievable market. Has been forever. It's just such an attractive place to do business and live for all the reasons we all know. So yes, I think Dallas will win big. You know this because hell, you're always 4 steps in front of me. There's tons of clients in California and New York looking at places like Dallas and Atlanta and Nashville and kind of southern, low tax, low regulation places. So no question that's going on big. I'm not certain about this, but I would tell you for sure the next 2 to 3 years, I feel like that will continue. Do I think San Francisco is going to fall into the ocean and people aren't going to want to be there? I don't buy it. It's a great global city. Absolutely, it's got problems. California has problems. San Francisco governance has problems, homeless, all that stuff. They'll work through that. It's a great city, just like New York. Yeah. And it could take 5 years or more, but ultimately those places will survive and be fine.
Yeah, I hope it takes them a while.
I think it will. I think it'll take several years. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've been spending some time in California, and it's kind of amazing their approach to businesses. It's kind of a nuisance, right? And it's growth is bad. Where it's such a different mindset, because in Texas growth is good. Like if you want to come here and bring a bunch of people, come on, we'll send a bus for you.
Yeah.
Where California, they're going, leave if you don't like it.
Well, there's good news because, as you know, there were two propositions that just got voted down in California.
Huge.
The split tax roll, where they were trying to tax commercial way more than residential, got turned down, and then they had a eviction policy that they were trying. And so somehow the populace decided this is a little too much, and so
Right.
that's a good sign. That's a good
Right.
sign.
Right. Well, I want to thank you. I mean, this has been like, you and I kind of get together maybe once a quarter or whatever. And I always kind of, whenever I leave spending time with you, I always go, God, we got to do that more often. Our lives are so hectic, but I just really value my friendship with you. And I think you have a lot to offer to the real estate industry you have. And I want to thank you for doing the podcast. And I want to thank you for your involvement in Trek and the way you give back. I mean, I've been involved with you at Children's, and I just think I love your heart.
Well, I love you, Billy. Thanks for that. By the way, thank you for leading Trek through it during a really difficult time, and you guys pivoted and did an unbelievable job with all this virtual stuff, the monthly calls with CEOs and or weekly and the podcast and all. You guys have really done a great job. And what I love about you is I always say sun is always shining on Bill Cawley's side of the street, and that is a gift you have, my friend.
Well, don't you actually though think life is I think it's 90% attitude. I mean, the bullets can be flying, but if you're thinking positive, somehow they're going to miss you, I think.
Well, as to my comment earlier, the human mind is a really, really powerful thing. And
Right.
you have a good one, and I appreciate you.
All right, man. I appreciate you. Thank
All right,
you.
buddy. Take
Thanks
care.
for doing this.